There we go. Who wants to jump in?
I'm Mary SanGiovanni. I write spooky monster stuff, cosmic horror, and as far as the topic of this panel goes, I would say that I am a secret. I'm still in the broom closet, I guess they say. I'm a secretly practicing Celtic pagan type person.
Hi guys, I'm Stephanie Wytovich. I write horror poetry, horror novels. I guess I typically do body horror, kind of like erotic horror as well. And like Mary, I am a practicing pagan, and I guess I would be speaking more from the witchcraft side of things here today.
I'll go next. I'm Bracken MacLeod. I'm the author of several books, including 13 Years of the Suicide Road and Come to Death. And I have a new book coming out next year from Mist and Heart called Clothing Cost, which is a home invasion novel. I'm on the panel, I think, representing sort of a split pass as a hard secularist, as an atheist author, but also as a card-carrying member and supporter of the Satanic Temple.
I'm Somer Canon, and I write scary stories featuring stubborn women. Like Mary, I'm a little more secretive about my more pagan beliefs. I'm not really out with them, yet here I am.
Welcome.
I think we're all in the same boat.
All right, I'm going to pop in with two announcements. One of you, your speakers are feeding back into your computer. I'm not sure who it is, but I suspect it might be Bracken. Yeah, no, it's not Bracken. All right, Mary, why don't you shut your computer down and come up here?
Okay. Hold on, folks. I'll be back.
All right, now let's try. No, still somebody. All right.
Are we still getting feedback?
Bracken, I suspect it's yours. I've muted him now. He can't talk. All right.
How's that?
Jay just messaged me. He lost power. So he's not going to be able to join us.
Oh, no.
But Mary's going to join your computer. But everyone needs to. Someone's speakers is still feeding.
Yeah.
Feeding back. All right, now try.
Technical difficulties. It's the influence of dark forces.
It's absolutely.
Mike? I think so.
I'm pretty sure it's Bracken's.
No. Let me try switching mics.
Okay.
Is that
Better, way better.
That's
oh?
it.
Oh,
I still hear a feedback.
I do too. All right, hop up a second.
Okay. I'm popping.
All right, let me try one more thing. Yes, folks, this is live. All right. You don't hear it at all, do you? Can you hear me?
I don't hear any feedback now.
I think it's Stephanie's. All right, how about now? Yep, it's Stephanie. It's your computer.
Okay. Let me see. Let me try. I'm going to try to log on my phone and see if it's a little bit better.
All right.
All right. And this isn't a problem, this microphone.
No, that works.
Great. Hi, Bracken. Hey, Brian, how you doing, man? We've lost the entire panel, but here we are.
So it's a panel on witchcraft and the occult, and immediately when the panel starts, Jay Wilburn's power goes out. And Stephanie's computer starts acting all weird.
Indeed. Well, dark forces are at work, you know, in the Scares That Care fundraiser. I was super excited to hear just now that we're close to the goal. Like at only 4 p.m. There's still 5 hours left to go.
We're at 8,575, and I don't even know how many hours we have to go. I've lost
I think
track.
it's going into at least 9. So that's fantastic.
Yep. All right.
But, I just want everyone to know that since it was Stephanie's computer and not mine, the problem was not Satan.
All right. Now we have
Any
Stephanie
better?
back. Way better. Okay. We've got everybody here. Mary, I'm gonna let you sit here. Since we don't have a moderator, I mean, we're all friends here. Can y'all just talk?
Yeah, we can just have a nice conversation. I think we can totally do that.
Perfect. Let me do one thing and then get out of the way here. All right. And
You bringing Mary back?
I'm going to bring Mary back.
All right.
Only because you demanded it.
We must have Mary.
Hi.
Hey, it's funny. So during everybody's introductions, we all kind of hit the same note, which was that most people don't make a sort of a big public display of their personal faith beliefs or who they identify as a spiritual person in their professional lives, and I wonder if you guys would like to talk about why you think that is for you personally. What is it about you that keeps you in the broom closet, as they say?
Oh, for me personally, I was raised Roman Catholic. I went to a Catholic school from the time I was in kindergarten till 8th grade. And my mother is pretty much a diehard Irish Catholic. And I respect that. Out of respect to her, I know that raising her children in a faith that she found comforting and supportive and as a guidepost to, being a good person, being a moral person. I get that that's important to her, but I also feel that there are certain things that the church does not take into account. It doesn't accept certain things. It doesn't explain certain things. And it never felt in my soul the way that the recent, I guess, spiritual pathway that I've taken feels to me. This feels like something my soul is remembering as opposed to something it's learning. Whereas Catholicism felt like something that it didn't take into account all of the ways to love people and all of the ways to approach the bigger picture of the afterlife and things like that.
Do you think she would have had an issue with, was the problem for you the idea that for certain people you knew that the only way that they felt that a person could be a moral person was to be of their faith background, and so you kept yourself kind of secreted about that, just so not to raise those feathers, or was that just a fear that didn't turn out to be something that played out?
Well, I think her worldview allows for the idea that other people could be good people, like moral people. But it is such an ingrained part of her life and part of her way of thinking. She teases me now when she calls me a heathen, but mostly because she knows I don't go to church on Sundays anymore, and she'll be like, "Oh, you heathen." But I do think it would bother her. I think it would make her feel like a failure that she didn't manage to raise me as a good Catholic girl the way she wanted. But I feel that, if you are raised in a religion, you are raised in that religion because ideally the people who raised you that way think it is the best possible pathway to happiness and goodness and genuine morality. And you reach an age where you decide if that works for you or if it doesn't. And for me, it just didn't.
Yeah, Stephanie or Somer, did you guys have did you two have similar experiences with sort of family background and your own personal identity as a person of faith?
Yeah, I know. Mary and I have talked about this a little bit too. I had a very similar upbringing. I was raised Catholic. My Nana was a hardcore Catholic. I often really wonder how she feels about being on like an ancestral altar that I have in my house right now. To be honest, I hope she's happy. But yeah, I was very hesitant to come out and kind of talk about the things that I was interested in and the issues that I was having within the Catholic faith. And so I hid it for a really long time. And then I think I kind of like loopholed myself into coming out of the closet without really realizing that I was doing it, because the more that I got into witchcraft, I was like, I wonder if I could approach this from a scholarly angle. And so I started doing all of this research. And then the more that people were like, well, you seem to know a lot about this. Are you a witch? I was like, well, I guess I can't really quite deny that.
Yeah, I'm not a hobbyist anymore, right?
Yeah, my students are bright. I got to hand it to them. Yeah, but it's been kind of a cool experience. I still I incorporate a lot of like my Catholic rituals and stuff like that into my practice. So it is kind of hybrid in that matter. But I feel like my family's pretty fairly aware of what's going on now. And so it's been a weird journey, but it feels good to kind of just be able to say it out loud now and not kind of be, dancing around it anymore.
Right. Somer, are you with us? I think you're still muted, Somer. You might need to unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can.
Please, somebody say, okay.
Yes.
I was brought up in a religious household, but it wasn't Catholic. It was Southern Baptist. And I grew up watching a lot of, there's a way you act in front of the church people, and then there's the way you really are. And I watched a lot of that sort of duplicitous acting with my family, and it always kind of turned me off. I'm not open to my family, one, because it would hurt them, and two, it's a conversation I don't want to have. I think that my beliefs are personal to me. I don't expect anybody else to have the same beliefs I do. So it is an intimate thing with me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, it's funny because you say it's an intimate thing, and that's exactly the experience that people have in mainstream religions too. Is that it's a very intimate thing, right? It's a part of your identity or your self-realization. I mean, I didn't grow up in a religious household. My mother was a deist and a Wiccan, and so I grew up around sort of pagan ideas and the occult and all of that. And my own sort of faith experience led me to a hard atheism, which I still hold to, which is that I don't believe in magic or an afterlife, a necrodestination of any kind. But at the same time, I found that in certain parts of religious faiths, including witchcraft and the satanic temples version of Satanism, there's a great comfort in ritual and sort of personal expression through something spiritually meaningful, even if you don't believe you're a spiritual being. And that's kind of where I'm at. I never had any fear about hurting my family or offending people because, we're sort of all over the map. My mother was a Wiccan, my sister's a witch and Satanist too, and my other sister is Mormon. We're kind of all over the place, and so we all have a respect for each other's individual beliefs, and it never sort of came in between us.
One of the things I find interesting, since we've been talking about the idea of a religion and then a deviation from that religion or toward a religion, is that I don't feel that the pagan belief system that I have contradicts Catholicism. If anything, it adds to it. Like, I'm perfectly okay with the idea that there's a God and probably a Jesus and angels and demons and saints and fairies and elementals and other spiritual beings that maybe don't quite have a classification that fits neatly into one of those things. And to me, that's, I mean, I remember reading somewhere, and I think Stephanie and I talked about this, and I know Somer and I have talked about this, that I read somewhere that God created angels to protect people, and he created the fairies to protect the plants and the animals. Like, to me, that's not a contradiction. I'm okay with having both of them in my worldview. I think that just given personal experience and certain, even scientific experience, intellectual experience, I can't fathom a world where there is nothing, but I can understand why people believe it. You know what I mean? Like, I can respect that viewpoint.
Or why they don't believe it.
What?
Or why they don't believe it.
Well, yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, why they would believe that there is nothing else after that.
Right.
But I also, like I said, I think it's like what Bracken said. You gravitate toward what you find, speaks to you, what you find comfort in, what you find is an expression of, what your soul genuinely believes, more than your brain, more than even your heart. It's what your soul genuinely believes.
Right. Stephanie, are you in the similar place to it says Brian Keene on the screen, to Mary, in a very sort of belief-based, a very belief-based kind of spirituality, or is it different?
No, I would say Mary and I are very much on the same page, kind of with how we're looking at things. And it's, I've seen a lot of posts and stuff like this that's been circulating. Not that I want to bring politics up at all right now, but I'm going to do it.
No.
Talking about like Christianity and stuff like that. And I think it's in a lot of ways really beautiful, because I think Catholicism brought me to witchcraft, but in a very organic way, in the sense that I feel like what my parents taught me growing up about what it meant to be a Christian and what it meant to be a Catholic was that, everybody is deserving of their place. Everybody is equal, no matter who anybody loves, what anybody loves. Like, it's all good. Like, you treat everybody as their equal. And I love that, but I wasn't seeing the actions reflecting coming from the Catholic Church, is where I started to have kind of a disconnect, in the sense that I felt like the organized religion part wasn't connecting with me, but the actual religion was. And so the more that I started researching like the history of witchcraft and like its relationship with the church and all of this stuff, it kind of seemed like they were one and the same. Like, a lot of rituals are being pulled from paganism. And so to me, they kind of blended in this, really gorgeous way, but I felt more respect and I felt more freedom kind of walking more of a pagan path than I did walking a Catholic one. But to me, the two were very, very similar.
Well, the Catholic tradition is filled with ritual and pageantry and magic. I mean, the miracle of transubstantiation during communion, right, is a form of magic that occurs in the middle of the ceremony. So I can see where it would be a natural progression from one to the other. It's funny because I have the opposite experience, I think, from you, which is that I don't have any of the religious faith, but I like the organization, which is to say that the Satanic Temple sort of socially engaged, almost, SJW kind of focus appeals to me in a way that makes me want to be a part of it and support it. Somer, what's your
sorry.
Bless you. Bless you.
The professional hiccup there. Sorry about that.
Somer, do you want to jump in here? How does your metaphysics affect your sort of belief system? Are you are you a secularist, or do you believe in all of the majesty of sort of the magical world?
I do tend to be, I don't know, I think I'm kind of a mix, and that's what I really like about it. That's what really draws me to paganism, is the distinct lack of judgment from other pagans. It's really, you know, a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. There's so many different subsets of paganism where you don't have to necessarily believe, like I don't necessarily believe what Mary believes, and she doesn't necessarily believe what I believe, and yet we can still talk about it. We can still have discussions about it. But the thing that really has always been important to me was the lack of judgment, because growing up, that was always sort of a virulent aspect of the spirituality I was being raised in.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I think we're awesome. Let's sort of move on, because it's because it scares that care, and we're here to talk about horror fiction, movies, books, etc. And so I'm kind of interested in hearing from all of you about how your personal belief system informs your work. Do you include it? Do you sort of dance around it? How do you reconcile your paganism with the stories that you tell? Stephanie, do you want to start this one? If you're not frozen. I don't know. Summer, maybe you want to keep going?
Okay, I'll go. My belief system, there's a scent to it, a very light scent of my belief system in my writing, and that, in paganism, there's a word that you hear a lot in the readings, and that word is intent. You want to infuse this with your intent. You want to fill this with your intent. And I sort of mutate that word into will when it comes to my writing. So the people in my stories have to end up sort of building their will in order to do the things that they carry out in these books. And it's sometimes very bad things that they do. And I mean, I don't talk about my belief system a lot in my personal life. I don't even talk about it really with my husband. So it's not something that stands out clearly in my work, but it is lightly there.
Right. Mary?
Well, for me, I feel that, and I used to even have this in my bio. I am like 100% Team Mulder. I want to believe everything. I want to believe at least in the possibility of everything. And I think when you write cosmic horror, and this, I've always found this interesting. I know a lot of people who write supernatural stuff are either atheist or agnostic, which I always found fascinating, because you're really kind of, I think, jumping a hurdle, I think, in order to write supernatural stuff that you don't believe in. See, I like to believe in the possibility that the things that I write could exist, maybe not in this dimension, but the whole point is that, generally speaking, they come from other dimensions. As far as anything directly connected to, I guess the closest, pagan pathway that I would follow is maybe Savage Woods, the idea that there are spirits in the forest that guard the trees, guard the plants, guard the flowers, and sometimes they get mad. Sometimes they're not always good creatures, sometimes they can go insane. I think I'd also read somewhere that the longer you live, the more likely you'll go insane and forget things, like your memory would start to go, and you'd start to go crazy. And that's kind of the concept behind Savage Woods, is that these things have been around for so long in such a negative place that they've started to go insane. But other than the possibility, the fairly open belief in the possibility of the occult being a very real thing, I don't know that I've ever actually addressed my own beliefs. I have a little bit in cosmic shenanigans, because one of the things we talk about are the cosmic horror stories, which I don't think personify is the right word, but they take elements of nature that are sort of above and beyond us, these great cosmic things like a black hole, and they give it a name. They make it a monster, And really what it is this indifferent natural occurrence that is completely oblivious to us. And if it did, it would just, I mean, it's a destructive force. It would just destroy us and they're, on its way through wherever it was going. And I think that's a very pagan concept. I mean, as beautiful as paganism is, the naturalist, the animist maybe aspect of it, can look at nature and say that nature is not always a beautiful thing. Sometimes it's a violent thing. Sometimes it's a hostile thing.
Right. That's a documentary that I think Stephanie's back in, and we got some feedback.
Yeah, I think we're getting feedback again.
Doing well, guys. I'm sorry.
Just while I have you guys, there are questions that are scrolling down. Oh, Brian, take care. Never mind.
Yeah, Brian's got it. So, there's a nature documentary made by Werner Herzog called Grizzly Man, and there's a moment in there where he talks about the maliciousness of nature and how, and sort of how driven it is toward destruction. I heard a hint of that in your in your answer. It's funny because in my own work, I do inject parts of my personal belief system into the work, because I feel like representation matters. And so while I populate my books with people from all sorts of different backgrounds, gay, straight, white, people of color, I have sympathetic Christian characters in the books, but my main characters are always atheists, because I want, and they're not proselytizing atheists. They're not people who are trying to convert anyone or make a point. But for the most part, they're skeptics, and they're just there so that other people who have that kind of worldview can have a hero or a sympathetic character in the book with whom they can relate. And so I make it a point to always include those people for the sake of reader inclusion, so that so I guess moving on, it's funny because religion is a huge part of horror fiction, which is to say that a lot of horror fiction is, I hesitate to say the word, to use the word propaganda, but it's very Christian oriented, and it's always very kind of driven toward the establishment majority view of the supernatural. If we're talking about Blatty's The Exorcist, which was written as a come to the Catholic Church, kind of book, or even like Buffy, where they find the ancient manual and it's monks and a sort of Christian way to defeat a very majority religion view of evil. I mean, is that something that you felt like has ever worked against a story for you, or do you just kind of accept it as part of the genre?
Well, I remember one of the first things about horror, not just like horror fiction, but like an actual essay, I guess, about horror, was in The Dark Descent, where he said there's like 3 different streams of horror, and one of the most popular and I guess prominent streams of horror or approaches to horror was that morality play. I mean, that it was prevalent in horror fiction. I guess I didn't notice until then, because my whole life being raised Catholic, everything was a morality play. I mean, all the parables, all
morality.
Yeah. So the idea that if you are good, eventually good things will happen to you, and if you're bad, eventually you'll get what you deserve. That was always kind of a thing that, I guess, is hung over. They say as much as I say my mother is very much entrenched in her religion, you can't go to Catholic school for 9 years and not have some of it ingrained into you as well. So I think that I didn't notice that was something that was more of a, I guess, common to my experience than maybe to a international experience, because horror without that Judeo-Christian foundation is very different. The approach to it is different. the outcomes are different, the monsters are different, for lack of a better way, the villains are different. And I've never had so much of an issue with it. But
you guys want to take some questions from the audience?
Yeah, let's do that. So
find the person lurking back here in the background.
Yes, Brian can. Yeah, let's do some audience questions.
Here we go. Alex Norcross asks, are there any story ideas you are hesitant to pursue because of your faith or because of the faith of close loved ones who may misunderstand? Or are there any ideas you've embraced due to faith?
I think it's a great question. I'm writing a book right now that's about the. It's sort of a 30 years later book about the Satanic Panic and about the way a religious viewpoint of the real world ruined a lot of innocent people's lives. And I have a character in the book who is a member of an organization sort of similar to the Satanic Temple. They're an activist, sort of liberal organization that seeks to increase religious plurality. And they're a sympathetic protagonist, but I work really hard not to make that character preachy or pushy of their beliefs in a way, because I want them to be a character and not a spokesperson, right? And so when it comes to sort of belief as a book, I think the story comes first, and it's the belief of the character that makes them well-rounded and more interesting. But I'm not sure that there's anything I would sort of stray away from, but I always want to make the focus of the book the story and not an individual belief, unless the belief is intrinsic to the story.
Yeah, I know when I was writing my novel, The Eighth, in some ways it was really freeing for me to write to tackle the themes of Catholicism the way that I was, even though I was absolutely terrified to be doing it. Just because I felt like I was uncovering things that made me uncomfortable or things that I felt really strong about. So I think those ideas often end up being the most cathartic. So I tend to kind of lean into it and welcome them when something gives me discomfort.
Right.
So yeah, so I'm usually all for those ideas.
I mean, for me, I still haven't really tackled, I guess, Catholics or Catholic priests as the bad guys, because I feel like my mother would be disappointed in me. But I do feel that I make an attempt, because I'm doing supernatural horror and cosmic horror, and the point of cosmic horror is to go big or go home. That I do try to look at other approaches, other religious viewpoints toward the cosmos, toward like the ultimate, nihilistic cosmic horror, and try to go beyond just the Judeo-Christian concepts.
Somer, I think you cut out when the question popped up, so here it is again. Or is Somer still cut out?
I think her mic is on.
She might be frozen.
All right.
Either that or she's just got amazing self-possession. She doesn't have it all.
Can you hear us now?
Am I here?
Yep, you're here.
Yep, we're here.
All right.
I can hear you.
We can hear you. Here. Now she's froze up again.
Listening.
Oh.
Okay.
All right.
To answer
there she is.
the question.
It's like a Family Guy skit here. Am I having let's move on to the next question. Have you ever received this is a great question. Have you ever received a bad review or negative reaction for a book solely due to your expression of your faith within your work?
Yes. Very much so. Yeah. It is what it is. If it upsets them, they don't have to read it. I don't know.
Right. Well, I mean, that's part of you can't write for everyone.
Right.
Right. ideally you write for the people who you feel like want to hear the stories that you have to tell, which are the people who have interests like you. And I've never gotten a bad review based on anyone's depiction of faith in the book. My bad reviews come from people hating my characters, thinking they're all jerks, and that I swear too much.
Yeah, I was gonna say I usually the bad reviews are like, all my characters are losers. I don't like the end of a story, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, I got a couple of bad reviews from sort of Menonists who think that my male characters are beta cucks who need to stop crying and man up. And I'm like, my work is not aimed at you, pal.
So you're writing what you know, then, Bracken. I'm sorry.
No, exactly.
That's wild, because I know when the 8th first came out, I had a lot of people who were really upset with the fact that Rhea, who's the female, I guess, protagonist, if you can call her that she was like really strong and wasn't kind of the like virgin in a white dress floating along the moors in a religious horror story. They didn't like that she had autonomy, that she was making her own choices. They wanted that stereotypical like exorcism type of, movie plot. And I'm just not here to give them that. Nor will I. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, Somer, let's test you.
8 times 12. Nope.
Okay. How should storytellers approach paganism to avoid the tropes that horror usually applies to non-Judeo-Christian faiths? Another great question there.
We don't burn people. We haven't done it since what? I don't know, ancient times.
Speak for yourself. I have a wicker man in my backyard right now.
Well, Bracken does, but
1st of August.
And although everybody, you do you. I can't say I come across a lot of orgy situations when getting together with other ladies who feel the same way that I do about the faith. I think much to Brian's dismay. No, sky-clad dancing in the woods yet. But then we'll look up to it.
They're still tough.
Sorry, I got a mental image I'm gonna have to say for later. But
for the folks watching at home, this really is what it's like when we all get together.
Yes.
Indeed.
Panels. This is just us.
Yes.
The problem with tropes and cliches about paganism and other religions in fiction is that they're based on, I think, an outsider's view. They're based on a sort of Judeo-Christian view of those faiths. And so what you get is you're not getting, when you want to write about a character who's a protagonist who is say a Wiccan or whatever, you want to write as if they are inside that belief system and it's inside of them. And so much of what you see, I think in media, movies, and books is what people who are outside of that tradition fear the most. And I think it was brilliantly subverted by the movie The Witch.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a very it's a movie that in essence embraces this idea of this sort of Miltonian romantic idea of Satan as a liberating force who literally removes all of the things that are holding the main character down. So the end she ascends, right? But does it in such a way that the whole story is told from the point of view of what if all of the things that these colonial era people believed about witches and the devil were true.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so the story told from that point of view, but the message is very contrary to those people's point of view.
Yeah, and I think to kind of build off of that, I think the other trope that often gets tied into all of that is this type of binary thinking that there is an all superior good and an all superior bad.
Mhm.
And there's no space for these like liminal discussions or these middle grounds about how they can intersect and feed off of each other. And like
Right.
you said, in The Witch, we see, Black Phillip coming in here and everybody's assuming he's the bad guy, but yet he's the one that hands her empowerment.
Right.
And he's the one that hands her autonomy. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's he's the one, even though it's horrible and everybody seems to suffer in the film, he's the one who removes her, all of the things that are oppressing her, literally holding her down to earth, right? Like oppressive religious structure and patriarchy and and tradition and all of these things. So yeah, I think it's an amazing film because it does take those outsider views and twists them and puts it in a very sort of Byronic Miltonian kind of viewpoint about the devil as a rebel against unjust authority, as opposed to just the bad thing that destroys.
Yeah, I think like you guys said, you bring up a good point that I think in a lot of I think pagans can see a lot more gray area maybe than certain traditional religions. Like there is not really a concept of an absolute good or an absolute evil. Mm-hmm. Everything's a shade of gray in the middle. And the at least I know the Catholics believe that God is an absolute good and that the devil is an absolute evil, although even that is flawed. But I think that to capture it, like Bracken said, from the inside, you'd have to accept a certain gray area when it comes to morality and be okay with that and have there be like a non-judgmental approach to that ambiguous morality. Because, not everything considered evil by some is actually evil,
Right.
At the same time, camp is great. Like there's a movie called The House of the Devil, where all of the devil worshippers are just black and white.
Yes.
Who are trying to sacrifice the babysitter so that they can create
fantastic.
And it's a wonderful movie because it's just campy and silly, and it embraces all of those ideas from the 80s about sort of the ridiculousness of binary good and evil.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, if you want to write seriously about the subject, get inside of it.
Yeah.
Do you see similarities in most of the main religions? If so, how do you feel about people merging religions?
Absolutely. I think from paganism straight through to all of the major religions of the world, it's like that phrase, about like if you had a bunch of people who could only see a piece of an elephant, they would describe what an elephant is differently. That to me is what religion is. That everybody's touching a piece of the elephant, but is only aware of what that piece represents. But it's all still an elephant. And I think there's a lot of similarity throughout. I think basically we wouldn't have so many conflicts between religions if we could just accept that it's more than any of us are thinking. It's more than any of us are aware of.
Yeah, I agree completely. I'm all for merging. I think that there's something to be learned from every religion. And I think I know something that was really, I think even more scary for me when I was kind of looking at different religions when I knew that I wasn't associating with Catholicism anymore. When I heard about the Satanic Temple, I was like, oh man, this is naughty. Should I be going into this? Is God going to slap my hand? I was really concerned about it. Same thing with witchcraft. I was convinced that something was going to prevent me from looking into it further. And then, the more that I deep dove into it and watching the documentary, Hell, Satan, ? There's so much there that coincides with everything that I believe, stuff that I've been taught to believe from, when I was born and growing up. It's all kind of just a different side to the same story, I kind of feel like.
Right. I mean, yeah, a lot of different faith traditions have at their base a similar structure of morality. From my perspective as a secularist, I think a lot of religions also have at their basis similarity and failure. in terms of the way that they've traditionally treated people's freedom or just even the humanity of women, right? But times are changing, and religion is trying to catch up to that, and and we certainly have to acknowledge that. But I think there is something to be. There's something really valuable in an interfaith conversation, in pluralism, and in comparative religion. I mean, knowing what people believe and why they believe it, even if it doesn't tell you anything about the universe, it tells you something about people.
Yeah.
Right. And it helps you understand other people's motivations and their drives in life and why they make the choices they do. So, even if you think it's all bullshit, it's still valuable to a person, and knowing why it's valuable to a person tells you something about them and about the way they interact with the world. Mike Duke writes, I'm a big believer that if you have a supernatural problem or adversary, then the solution should be supernatural. What do you guys think? What do you think?
In my books, usually if there is a supernatural problem, particularly in the Kathy Ryan series, where the main character, Kathy Ryan, is I don't want to say she's an occult detective. She's more like a freelance consultant in occult things, particularly cosmic horror occult things. But it's basically, if there's a supernatural problem, generally there needs to be a supernatural solution. The only difference, I think, would be like if you had something physical, like a vampire or werewolf. That's something, if it's got a physical body, then you can probably kill it. And if, regardless, the solution is always knowing it first, because if you understand it, you can kill it, But yeah, generally I would agree with that. And I like the supernatural solutions. They're fun.
I think it's a matter of how do you resolve the story in a way that the reader is going to believe. And if you posited a universe in which the supernatural exists, right, because you have vampires or you have, immortal liches or whatever, then you've posited a world in which a supernatural solution exists, and it makes sense to apply it. I don't write a lot of supernatural fiction. When I do, it's just kind of the way the world works. You've found that this is a thing that exists, and so this is a thing you have to treat on its terms. But it doesn't necessarily have to be a supernatural solution in a majority tradition that solves your problem. I think that fantastic. We've been talking about it all day. Stephen Graham Jones' new book, The Only Good Indians, right, is fantastic because it's centered in a supernatural concept that is inherently Native American. Right, and it doesn't have any hints of sort of Christian sin, guilt, redemption, any of this. It's about responsibility. It's about stewardship. It's about owning what you've done, and it's supernatural, but it's also very secular, and it's an amazing book. But yeah, it comes up with a similar sort of thing. Like if you posit a supernatural situation, the solution can very reasonably be supernatural, but I think it ought to be internally consistent.
Yes,
right, and that's what it does in that amazing book. Like you need this book in your eyes now, because it's cool, and it is. It's an outsider voice, it's or a marginalized voice. It's 100% a Native American story, and it's fabulous.
Speaking of books that we need in our eyes, we come to the end of this panel. But before we let the three of you go, tell us about your latest, where folks can get it. Let's start.
Go.
Yeah, so my latest poetry collection is The Apocalyptic Mannequin, which is all kind of focusing on how we define the body. And that can be found at Raw Dog Screaming Press.
Cool.
There we go. My latest book is a couple of years old. It's called Come to Dust. It's a supernatural story, so we'll go with that one. It actually deals a lot with religion, and it's about sort of children who've died and come back, and the world is trying to cope with it. And so, of course, the religious question of that is sort of in the forefront of the book. It can be found pretty much everywhere. The purveyors of fine books sell them. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Powell's Books. Your local indie can get a handle on it wherever. My next book isn't coming out until July of next year, so that's the one you should look for, is Come to Dust.
I have the last book of mine that came out was Beyond the Gate, which is the most recent Kathy Ryan book. That was, I think, maybe last year. I have 2 novellas coming out, but with the pandemic, it's hard to say when. One of them is called The Shapes of Night. The other one is called The Skin We're In. And both of them.
That's a great title.
That is a great title.
The latter one is actually my first post-apocalyptic novella, so we'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
But that's what I got. I should probably get a hair now.
Well, this was fantastic, guys. Despite the technical difficulties brought on by the forces of light trying to stifle our voices, right? I just had a wonderful time talking to you.
Yeah, it was good to see you guys again.
All right.